Hey there, fellow citizens. Tonight we're diving into the world of lawful interception, also known as wiretapping. It's a topic that sounds like something out of a spy thriller, but it's actually way more common and disturbing than you might think. We're talking about the government's ability to listen in on your phone calls, read your emails, and track your every move online. Sure, they promise they're only doing it to catch bad guys, but at what cost to our privacy? Spoiler alert, it's a slippery slope. 1 minute they're targeting terrorists, and the next they're collecting data on your grandma's cat videos. Okay, maybe not cat videos yet. But the point is, lawful interception is a powerful tool that can be used for good or evil, and it's up to us, the people, to make sure it doesn't turn into a runaway surveillance state. So buckle up, Buttercup, because this is going to be a wild ride. Believe it or not, wiretapping isn't exactly a new invention. It's been around for over a century, evolving alongside technology. Back in the day, it was all about tapping actual wires, like those used for telegraph and telephone communication. World War I was a real boom time for wiretapping. Governments quickly realized that listening in on enemy communications could give them a serious edge. And let's be honest, when has a government ever turned down a chance to spy on its enemies, or its own citizens for that matter? Fast forward to the digital age, and suddenly, wiretapping isn't about physical wires anymore. It's about intercepting digital information, emails, text messages, internet browsing history, the whole shebang. And thanks to the internet, surveillance became global and virtually invisible. Okay, so maybe the government has legitimate reasons to use wiretapping sometimes, but history has shown us that even with good intentions, and let's be real, those are in short supply, things can go sideways fast. Remember COINTELPRO, that charming little FBI program back in the 50s and 60s that spied on civil rights activists and anti-war protesters? They used wiretaps to discredit and disrupt groups they deemed subversive, even if those groups were just exercising their right to free speech. And let's not forget about Watergate. Turns out, President Nixon wasn't just paranoid, he was also a big fan of using wiretaps to spy on his political opponents. That whole scandal was a masterclass in how not to use government surveillance. These examples show how easily lawful interception can be twisted for nefarious purposes. It's a slippery slope from keeping us safe to silencing dissent. And once you start down that path, it's hard to turn back. The Fourth Amendment to the US Constitution is supposed to protect us from unreasonable searches and seizures. That sounds great in theory, but in practice it's kind of a mess. The government argues that national security concerns trump privacy rights, especially in the wake of 9/11. Enter the Patriot Act, passed in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. This law significantly expanded the government's surveillance powers, making it easier for them to obtain warrants for wiretaps and other forms of surveillance. The problem is, these warrants often come with very loose restrictions, allowing for broad and indiscriminate collection of data. And it's not just about terrorism. Law enforcement agencies also use wiretaps to investigate drug crimes, organized crime, and even white-collar offenses. Basically, if they can find a reason, they'll listen in. Section 5, National Security, the all-purpose excuse for spying. National security has become the go-to justification for all sorts of government overreach, including mass surveillance. But how are we supposed to know if our security is actually being threatened, or if the government is just using fear to justify its actions? The truth is, much of the information gathered through mass surveillance programs is classified, so there's no way for the public to know what's being collected or how it's being used. This lack of transparency makes it impossible to hold the government accountable for potential abuses of power. And let's not forget the chilling effect on free speech. When people fear that their every move is being watched, they are less likely to speak out against the government or engage in activities that might be perceived as suspicious. That's not how a free society is supposed to function. Section 6. Remember Edward Snowden? Yeah, that's still a thing. Back in 2013, Edward Snowden, a former NSA contractor, blew the whistle on the agency's massive surveillance programs. He revealed that the NSA was collecting phone records, emails, and internet data from millions of Americans, all without a warrant. Snowden became public enemy number one for the US government, but he also sparked a global debate about the balance between security and privacy in the digital age. His revelations showed just how far the government had gone in its quest for information, and it made people start asking some tough questions. The Snowden leaks were a wake-up call, but have we really learned anything? While some reforms have been implemented, the surveillance apparatus remains largely intact. Section 7. Big Tech to Uncle Sam. We're just following orders. It's not just the government we need to worry about. Tech companies are in on the surveillance game too. Companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon collect vast amounts of data on our online activities, from our search histories to our shopping habits. And guess who gets access to that data? You guessed it, the government. Through secret court orders and data sharing agreements, tech companies are handing over our personal information to intelligence agencies. They claim they're just complying with the law, but that's a pretty weak excuse when they're actively profiting from our data. The line between government surveillance and corporate data collection has become increasingly blurred, and that's a dangerous thing for our privacy. Section 8, the GDPR. Europe tries to put the genie back in the bottle. While the US government continues to drag its feet on privacy, the European Union has taken a much more proactive approach. The General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, went into effect in 2018, and it's a big deal. The GDPR gives individuals more control over their personal data and imposes strict rules on companies that collect and process that data. It's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. The GDPR has been hailed as a landmark achievement in the fight for digital privacy. It sends a clear message that our data belongs to us, not to governments or corporations. Section 9. What happens in Vegas stays on a server. Somewhere we live in a world where our every move is tracked and recorded. From our smartphones to our smart speakers, we're surrounded by devices that collect data on our every move, and that data can be used to create a detailed profile of our lives, including our habits, preferences, and even our political beliefs. This constant surveillance has real-world consequences. It can be used to discriminate against us, manipulate our behavior, and even silence dissent. And as technology continues to advance, the potential for abuse will only grow. It's time to start thinking seriously about the implications of living in a surveillance society. Because if we don't, we risk losing our privacy and our freedom along with it. Section 10. So is your smartwatch spying on you? Maybe. Remember those cool new gadgets you got for Christmas? Yeah, well, they might be spying on you. Smart TVs, fitness trackers, even your refrigerator can collect data on your daily activities. And that data can be shared with third parties, including advertisers and, yes, the government. The Internet of Things, or IoT, is making our lives more convenient, but it's also creating a surveillance nightmare. With so many devices collecting data on us, it's virtually impossible to maintain our privacy. We need to start demanding more transparency and control over our data. We have the right to know what information is being collected about us and how it's being used, and we have the right to say no to constant surveillance. Section 11. Fight for your right to privacy because nobody else will. Look, the fight for privacy isn't going to be easy. Governments and corporations have a vested interest in keeping us under surveillance, but that doesn't mean we should give up. We need to educate ourselves about our rights and the ways in which our privacy is being eroded. We need to support organizations that are fighting for our digital liberties, and we need to hold our elected officials accountable for protecting our privacy. The future of privacy depends on us. If we don't stand up for our rights, we risk losing them altogether. So let's make some noise, folks. Let's show them that we're not okay with living in a surveillance state. Let's fight for our right to privacy.